Okay, so for the second year in a row, our planet is absolutely smashing temperature records. And you know what's crazy? At the very same time, global emissions are still going up. We're at this critical deadline where countries have to submit new climate targets for 2035. So, what actually makes a climate plan good enough to tackle this crisis? Let's dive into this guide from the Climate Action Tracker and break it all down. All right, here's the plan. First, we'll get into why this is a full-blown emergency. Then, we'll look at the huge gap between what's been promised and what's actually happening. After that, we'll unpack a four-part guide to what a real effective climate target looks like. And we'll wrap up with the big question: are governments going to deliver? So, why all this urgency around these new targets? Well, because we are living in a climate emergency, plain and simple. We're talking extreme heat, devastating floods. You see it in the news every day. This isn't some far off problem anymore. It's happening right now, and the clock is ticking really, really loud. Now, take a look at this number: 2.7 degrees Celsius. This is what's truly terrifying. This is where we are headed. If you look at the policies and the actions that governments are actually putting into place today, this is the catastrophic level of warming we're on track to hit. But that's not the goal. The whole world agreed in the Paris Agreement to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. That huge canyon between 2.7 and 1.5, well, that's the problem we have to solve. And this next round of targets is pretty much our last best shot to steer the ship back onto a safer course. So let's really dig into that gap, because it's not just one gap, it's actually two. And what's so revealing is how they show this massive disconnect between what governments say they'll do and what they're actually doing on the ground. This chart just lays it out so clearly. See that bottom green line? That's the steep, rapid drop in emissions we need to be on for a 1.5-degree world. But the lines way up at the top, that's where we're actually going. Emissions are still climbing when they need to be plummeting. And that giant space in between, that's what we call the emissions gap. Okay, so here's the first crucial point. Even if every single country met its current 2030 climate promise, the official target they have on paper, we would still have an emissions gap of 19 to 22 gigatons. By the way, that little E just stands for equivalent. It's a way of bundling all the different greenhouse gases into one number. So this is the target gap. It means the official goals themselves just aren't strong enough. But wait, because it actually gets worse. When you look at the policies governments are really putting in place, the gap widens to a staggering 24 to 27 gigatons. This is the implementation gap. And it's basically proof that we aren't even on track to meet our own weak targets. All right, so the situation looks pretty bleak. I get it. But the good news is we know exactly what we need to do. The Climate Action Tracker has laid out a super clear, actionable framework for what a good, effective, science-based climate target has to include. And it all boils down to these four things. A good target has to have ambition, it has to deal with finance and fairness, it has to be credible, and it has to be transparent. Just think of it like a 4-point checklist for climate action that could actually work. So let's break down each of these four elements, because this is really your toolkit. Once you understand these, you can spot the difference between a real climate plan that can get us out of this mess and, just a piece of paper designed to look good. First up is ambition. And let's be really clear here. This isn't just about setting some nice sounding goal for 2035. The most important thing here is that putting off action is just not an option anymore. A credible plan means governments have to go back and strengthen their 2030 targets right now. Without deep, radical cuts this decade, that 1.5-degree goal is gone. It just slips away, no matter what's promised for the future. Second, finance and fairness. This part recognizes a basic truth. Not every country has the same responsibility for this crisis, or the same ability to fix it. So it's a two-part deal. On one hand, developed nations have to lead with deep cuts at home and seriously ramp up financial support for others. On the other hand, developing nations need to bring ambitious targets to the table that are conditional on getting that support, and they have to clearly say what they need to get it done. Number 3, and this is a huge one, credibility. A target on a piece of paper is completely meaningless if there's no believable plan to actually hit it. This means having real, detailed strategies, but honestly, the most important part is ending all the contradictory policies. You just can't claim you're fighting a fire while you're also pouring gasoline on it by subsidizing and expanding fossil fuels. The math just doesn't work. And this slide just perfectly shows that credibility gap in action.
On one side, you've got countries like Costa Rica and Colombia taking real steps to move away from fossil fuels. That's credible. But on the other side, you have major economies like Australia and even the UAE, who hosted last year's climate summit, actively investing billions to expand oil and gas. That is the literal definition of a non-credible policy.
And finally, our fourth element, transparency. This is all about fighting the creative accounting that can make a weak plan look strong. A good target needs to be a simple, absolute number for the entire economy. You can't let governments hide their fossil fuel pollution by mixing in fuzzy numbers from planting trees or counting on some unproven carbon removal tech that might not even work. It's got to be clear and honest. So here's your quick checklist for transparency. A solid plan does all the stuff with a green check mark. It sets one absolute goal, it covers everything, and it has a clear pathway. But what's crucial is that it avoids the things with a red X. It doesn't let a government use something like forests to mask a failure to cut emissions where it really counts, which, let's be honest, is overwhelmingly from burning fossil fuels. So there you have it. That's the guide. Ambition, fairness, credibility, and transparency. The framework is clear. The science is undeniable. So now the spotlight turns to the governments who have to actually write and submit these plans. And this timeline is just incredibly tight. According to the science, global emissions have to peak before next year. By early 2025, all these new plans are due. And by 2030, those plans have to help cut global emissions almost in half. The window of opportunity is closing, and it's closing fast. I think this quote from the report really just says it all. Postponing action until 2035 is not an option and is not credible. It would be far too late. We just can't kick this can down the road anymore. This isn't about setting a goal for a decade from now. It's about what we do between now and then. Any plan that relies on waiting is simply not a credible plan. Which leaves us with this one final crucial question. Over the next year, every nation is going to lay its cards on the table. They have the blueprint for what a good plan looks like. The whole world is watching. So will they follow it? Because the future of that 1.5-degree goal really hangs on their answer.